Well, that didn't necessarily go as planned, but here I am. I was planning on going live on LinkedIn and couldn't get my streaming software up and couldn't figure out how to link anything. But here we are. We're going to be talking about skill acquisition just a little bit. Going to be going into some of the reasons why people tend to fall off of their goals. And some of you may know that I started my own gym. Right now it's online focused, and I will be going over a little bit about what that's going to be like. Don't know exactly how long I'll be live, but if you're here, happy you're here. If you're watching this in the future, well, hello from the past. I'm going to be talking a touch about immovable goals. Going to be talking a little bit about. Let me get this over in front of me so I can actually see what I'm talking about. I mean, I know what I'm talking about. I'm a genius. I'm just kidding. I'm not a genius. Going to be talking about immovable goals. Going to be talking about breaking down your goals into bite-sized pieces, eating right and why that's important, and why sometimes eating wrong feels so right. That sounds so weird, but it's true. And then we'll also be talking about how, believe it or not, gluttony is right up there with drunkenness. I meant to have my scripture ready for this as well. So I won't be going in too deep on these things, but if you do happen to join in, feel free to ask questions at any time. I'm more than happy to answer them. But we're going to hop right in. Unfortunately, like I said, I couldn't get my, can I share my screen? That looks like a screen share. Oh my goodness, I can share my screen. Okay, so maybe we can do this with sharing my screen with some things. Okay, so talking about the principle of goals and why we need to make sure that we have immovable goals. So an immovable goal basically means it's a goal that isn't going to change as you get closer to it. What I mean by this is sometimes we set a goal for ourselves and it could be like, oh, I want to feel better, or I want to look better, or I want to lose weight. None of those are bad goals to have. However, they're not measurable. So anytime you make a goal, you want to make sure that it's something measurable, something that you're able to go into a spreadsheet, go into a document and say, here's where I am, this is where I want to be. And once we start doing that, then you can break it down into bite-sized pieces, which brings me to the next topic, bite-sized pieces. But before we move on to that thoroughly, we're going to talk about an immovable goal. So the immovable goal that I always bring up is seeking God. That is a goal that's never going to change. It's always going to be there. Some people feel like it's, a moving target, but if you think about it, the target never moves. God is always going to be there. He is who he is. He was, or he is. I forget exactly how to say it properly, but he always was, and he always will be. The same as he is now is the same as he was is the same as he will be. So it could feel sometimes like that's a daunting goal, but at the same time, the longer I've been on this venture, the more I've realized that it actually feels very fulfilling. Sure, sometimes it can be a very high goal to achieve, something that can be on days feel like a very heavy weight, but at the same time, that's kind of the point. You want it to be something that feels very like a very big stretch for where you are now. So that way you're able to stretch yourself. So as you're learning more things, you're able to continue to build on top of those things. So what I mean by stretch yourself is right now, me writing up a document on just general health and wellness is fairly simple. I won't say it's necessarily easy just because putting it all into words, everything that I know can be a little bit difficult sometimes, or I should say hard. But what I mean by simple is it's something that I have been doing for so much of my life that to be able to relay it to somebody in a very basic way, as far as how to get started, is easy enough for me. Now, there are some changes there depending on you yourself so that it feels like it is applicable directly to you. And this is why having a trainer who is one-on-one is very important, or a small group to one is very important, because they'll be able to speak to you specifically so that you're able to connect the dots without having to think too hard about what you're going for. Meaning we have a lot of these books that are explaining how you can achieve certain goals. We have a lot of books out there explaining how to reverse engineer what you do, explaining step one of starting your fitness journey. But at the same time, there's going to be a little bit of nuance for everybody. And this doesn't come because we're just trying to, or I should say, this doesn't happen. What's the best way to word this? The nuance for everybody is because we are all different people. And it's not saying that we're so different that it's unachievable for anybody. And now this is taking out like legit detrimental injuries, ailments, anything like that out of the picture for now, solely because it is going to be, oops. Okay, there we go. Solely because it is going to have a lot of nuance if you're already dealing with something currently. And I don't mean something as far as you're dealing with, you haven't worked out in a while and you need to get back on track. That's going to be a little bit easier as compared to if you have an autoimmune disease and you're constantly in pain. That's going to be something totally different. For something like that, it's going to be a little bit more specialized help. Still applicable with what I'm saying, you will need specifics on how to connect the dots of reverse engineering your goals so that you can move forward to where you want to be. But at the same time, it's going to be a little bit different than someone who is maybe reading Atomic Habits and they're either an entrepreneur or a high achiever in their field, or even somebody who is going from like high school into college. There's going to be a lot of steps that are going to be unknowns. So having someone there who is one-on-one, or if you're in a small group, someone to talk to that can speak specifically to you is going to be a game changer in a lot of cases, because they'll be able to see things that you may not know just because of being new to whatever process you're looking into, or because sometimes an outside perspective is all that you need to be able to make a little bit of a difference. So the other part to that, again, is going to be breaking it down into bite-sized pieces. So breaking it down into bite-sized pieces basically means right now I'm building a business and it's the online fitness business. So this YouTube page YouTube channel that I'm on now used to be called Business 065. And what I wanted to do with that was be able to show people the beginning stages of a business and how I build it up to wherever it's going to be in the future. And I'm not someone who likes to limit the things I can do or the amount of growth that I can achieve. I definitely don't believe that it is a sin to be rich. I think it becomes sinful how you use that money in the future. That's where it gets a little bit blurry. So I am someone who, as I go through this process, I'm going to share it with you as much as I possibly can without divulging too much, personal information or information that could, get me in trouble. I'm not going to be sharing my account passwords and stuff like that. But I'll show you as much as I possibly can so that you can get an inside look on what it looks like starting a business from scratch. So if you have seen any of my playlists already, you'll see that I have some business jargon definitions in shorts that you can take a look at. And those will be quick snippets of some of the words that you'll hear commonly thrown around in the business field. I also have a vast amount of exercise playlists and exercise videos that you'll be able to check out also. So if you're just now starting a business and you're looking to have someone to kind of build it with, checking in on this channel every now and again, especially during these lives, could be a really good idea, because you'll be able to see how I'm taking the big picture of the business and reverse engineering it into now. So for me, turning my big goals into bite-sized pieces looks like right now, I'm trying to build generational wealth. What my ultimate goal is to build a large business that will help people with skill acquisition. And what I mean by skill acquisition is being able to, instead of just saying, oh, I want this goal, let me just start doing things, you start to break down what skills you need to stack in order to get where you're going. So one of my goals with this business, not only with the skill acquisition, but the overarching goal is to build 3 generations of wealth for my family to go, meaning everyone in my generation is covered, everyone after me is covered, everyone after them is covered, and then everyone after them is covered, making sure that, of course, my parents, aunts, and uncles, and grandparents are taken care of as well. So with that, I will have to figure out exactly what I am building and how I'm going to be able to affect that. And within that, I do feel a call to ministry. I have a very big interest in learning languages. So my learning languages is going to be one of the skills that I'm trying to acquire, or am acquiring actually. I do take Spanish lessons every week, but I'll talk more about that as we get a little bit further into sharing on this channel. And so the skills that I'm going to need is obviously going to be how to manage people online for the online personal training business, how to manage people in person for the in-person personal training business, the back end business work, networking, and then of course it's going to be advancing that company as I go, and whether it's online, in person, seeing what programs and softwares are going to help me move it forward more effectively. So those are some of the skills that I'm already working on or have that I'm trying to grow, that I am growing, doing my best to not say try as much anymore. So that way I can get a business that is going to be not only sustainable, but sustainable and scalable. So that's a little bit of an example of talking about bite-sized pieces. And now getting a little bit into the more specific physical aspect. Sometimes when I am talking about these different skills that we're trying to stack to my clients, and of course, when I'm talking to clients specifically, I don't always break it down this way when it comes to in the gym. Usually I'm going to break it down more so as far as what is your goal, what weights are we going to need to do, how much are you going to be doing your reps, what does the food look like, and other things as far as that's concerned, the water intake, the sleep, the vitamins that you're taking. Mind you, I'm not a doctor, so these are not necessarily prescriptions, but they're going to be recommendations or suggestions based on what a doctor is already telling you, and I will support whatever the doctor, well, let me rephrase. I will not go over what the doctor is saying. If a doctor tells you to do something, I have no right, or I'm not allowed to be able to tell you to do something different or to ignore them. I definitely will not be saying that. So when it comes to the eating part of things, sometimes as we're trying to eat better, a lot of people will say, well, I just don't like the taste of healthier food. And I can totally understand that. I grew up just like anybody else. My parents did their best as far as feeding me healthy, but there's a lot of stuff that we just didn't know back in the 90s and early 2000s when it comes to the different foods that you're eating. So I ate a lot of Hamburger Helper growing up. I ate a lot of box foods growing up, like Easy Mac and things of this nature, Kraft macaroni and cheese. Now, I'm not saying that that's the worst stuff to eat. It's definitely not. There are things way worse than that. But it is processed foods, and that's what I have experience with. Of course, candy and things of that nature. But some of those things are going to be formulated to be able to be more palpable to you so that you'll want to eat more. So an example of this is Lay's saying you can't eat just one, or whatever the saying is, or bet you can't eat just one. They make those chips with a certain formula so that you don't eat just one, because they want to sell you as much as possible. So that kind of processed food is going to taste vastly different than something that's organic. But something that's organic is going to be much more sustainable as far as what it's going to do for your body, and it's going to be more conducive for how you grow going forward. And that's for any kind of goal that you're aiming towards. You don't want to be fueling yourself with a bunch of stuff that's basically like kerosene. And that's an extreme example. But the organic foods, the closer you can get to the ground and to what's real, is going to help you be able to fuel yourself with something that is your body is going to not only enjoy, but be able to break down easier and help you push toxins out of your bodies in certain cases. So why does it sometimes feel so wrong to eat right? A lot of it is because we are just conditioned, not only as a culture, but individuals, to be eating things that we're not supposed to be eating, to be eating things that are formulated for us to like them more than organic foods. And sometimes it feels wrong eating the healthy foods because you may not get that same dopamine kick as you would as if you're eating highly processed foods. So that's why we want to make sure that as we're breaking down our goals into bite-sized pieces, as we're setting our immovable goal, as we're thinking about the things that we eat, we, of course, include our emotions because they are going to be a part of any decision that we make, but we're not making those the decision makers. Oftentimes, we go for what we want rather than what is going to help get us forward more so. And we don't want to go off of the things that we want just because that's what feels good. If we go off of our feelings all the time, we're going to end up breaking things down and going backwards with where we're trying to go. I'll leave a lot of caveats off on that. But you want to make sure that you're not just living off of your feelings. They will be taken into consideration, but you want to look at more or less the math of what you need to do in order to be able to move forward. So when it comes to eating right and why sometimes it feels wrong, it's because we're not conditioned to do it. So as you're going on your goals, you want to check in with what you're putting into your body. And yes, I do include alcohol in this. I do include certain vitamins that you may be taking in this. Believe it or not all vitamins are good for you as far as the ones that are on the shelves. A lot of them have copper in them in higher amounts. A lot of them have, I'll just leave it at that. I don't want to start saying anything before I'm not fully prepared. I'll make sure that I look into all of these topics specifically before I do the lives on them in a more deep fashion. But I'll just say that the overarching statement that I'll say with vitamins is they're not formulated for you specifically. So if you're already eating a very nutrient dense food, a nutrient dense diet, and I'm not talking diet as far as like one of these fads that come on, but just what you're eating in that day, you may not need certain vitamins that people are pushing towards you just because you're getting it from other foods. I'm going to stay off the topic of our foods are not as nutrient dense as they used to be. This is just an overarching statement. This is not advice in any way, shape, or form. But all that being said, you want to evaluate the things that you're putting into your body, whether it be alcohol, the different veggies. Are they more starchy? Are they more leafy green? The different meats that you're eating. Is it a highly processed meat? Is it something that's a better cut? Is it is it high in fat? Kuma, bless. Just make sure my dog's not eating anything he's not supposed to be. And sometimes, especially when you're eating something that you know is like from the cookie or cracker or chip aisle or even the candy aisle, you want to be looking at what is on that bag or what is in that nutrient table. Because on those nutrition tables, they are supposed to put in everything as long as it's over, I think, like 2% or something like that in the food. But again, don't want to go too deep on this right now. I'm just trying to put in some caveats because I know it can be very muddy out there, especially with those nutrient tables. Everyone not believing in the FDA nowadays. I totally get it. I get it. But you want to be taking a look at that, because as long as the first 5 ingredients aren't something that is like chemical based or man-made processed, it's going to be a little bit better for you, as opposed to if sucralose or dextrose is like the first or second ingredient, or guar gum, all of these different things. Yes, some of them are binders, but believe me, they're still not good for you. But I want to say, back to my main point, give yourself grace as you're analyzing these things. It can be easy to start beating yourself up as you're eating something that's considered junk food. And then next thing you know, you're like, oh, I'm a terrible person or something. So if you're eating something that's a little bit more junky, give yourself some grace. Work on the discipline the best you can, only a little bit. Try to put it up, save some for later. Or, if you're going to be hardcore with it, give it to, maybe just throw it away. We don't need to be poisoning other people. But all that to be said, the first thing that we want to do after we get our immovable goal, after we start breaking things down into bite-sized pieces, is analyzing where we are currently, not only in your food, but in your exercise and the other skills that you're looking to achieve. So for me, to just have an example, I'm working on my Spanish right now. So I know I take a tutor lesson every week on italki with Azael. I read as much as I can in Spanish. I have a Kindle that a friend gifted me. Thank you very much. And that helps me. I use that for pretty much just my Spanish reading. I have about 3 different books in there, including some that have the definitions. I just got this right here, Madrigals, Magic Key to Spanish. And I heard a lot about this on YouTube when I was first looking into learning Spanish like 2 years ago, re-looking into Spanish. So I know the things that I'm doing right now for Spanish. So that's me taking inventory. And then I look at how my progress is going. Right now I felt, well, not right now, but last week or so, I felt like I was plateauing a little bit. So what I started to do was I went onto YouTube. I looked up some Spanish channels. I know enough Spanish now that I can start typing in the search engine in Spanish. And that was something that I really was that was a real big barrier for me. Is I was typing in like Spanish videos about this, and I was having people who were American or speaking English talking about how they're learning Spanish, and that was pretty much it. But I found out if I start typing in the search engine in Spanish about the things I want to learn or things I'm looking up, it's going to give me back more Spanish channels, more Spanish speaking channels. So when I was looking up bonsai, I started looking up, things like poder el bonsai, and that's pruning a bonsai, and it brought me up some more Spanish channels. The other day, I'm like, okay, I haven't looked up the news in a while, so I did it completely wrong, but I put in Nuevas de Mexico. Come to find out, it's noticias, I believe, but close enough. It gave me what I was looking for anyway. And I found live videos that run like all the time. So multimedia, I can't remember the name of the channel right now, but Canal 6 is the channel that I watch, and it's from I think central Mexico, or like a little bit towards the Gulf. So that's me analyzing where I am now and realizing that with just watching some videos in Spanish, and then the key was speaking more in Spanish for me. Having more conversations in Spanish is my next step, is the step I'm currently working on. So my cousin is fluent in Spanish, although he might have a little caveats with that. And as I'm networking for the business, I'm meeting a lot of Spanish speakers. So as I'm meeting them, I'm talking in Spanish as much as I possibly can. Now it's business first, and then I speak Spanish. That way I don't hold myself back in the business realm or hold the other person back in the business realm just for me to be able to talk Spanish. But I'll be able to still use my Spanish as much as I possibly can. Now, I do have a bad habit of saying sí to pretty much everything. So I do find people get a kick out of it. So I'm not saying that I'm going to break that habit anytime soon. But when people talk to me in Spanish, I will respond in Spanish the best that I can. But if they say something that, maybe it'll be es un placer is a better response, or suena bien is a better response, I'll still say sí. Just because, yes, it still gets a point across. I'm still in agreement. But to me, it's a little entertaining because I can't always think about what I want to say to appropriately respond to this specifically, but I know that just saying yes is a good enough answer for them to understand that we're in agreement. And everyone tends to get a little bit of a smile, a little bit of a laugh out of that. So I'm okay with it. They seem to be okay with it too whenever I give that response. So it's fine. So that's how you find an immovable goal, break it down into bite-sized pieces, analyze where you are currently. And then for me, like I said, my immovable goal is looking to get further or closer to God, or further on my Christian journey as I possibly can each day. So for me, what I try to do is I need to do it more, to be totally honest with you. But I look at the different habits or the different commands and promises that are in the Bible told to us that are going to apply more so to our real life situations right now. So one of the things that I encounter a lot being a trainer is people who tend to say that, they just can't stop eating, or, well, I just love food. I mean, have you noticed that whether it's a wedding, a networking event, a funeral, maybe barbecue is not the best example, but pretty much all the get-togethers that we do, food is a huge part of it. And what are the foods that you typically see? It's going to be foods drowned out in sauces, high in carbs, high in salt, high in sugars, a lot of sweets. The drinks are usually going to be sodas. I know there's a lot of debate when it comes to the sodas right now, if it's going to be like 0 calorie and stuff like that. Sure, the stuff in there is chemicals. But from what I'm understanding, it's not the worst thing in the world. Don't take that as advice. I will say, however, you cannot rely on just these processed drinks for your fluid intake throughout the day. So something I try to be very mindful of is I use this as much as I possibly can. I try to get at least 4 or 5 in there every day. That way I know I'm getting close to or getting my 100 ounces. It's 20-ounce bottle. So if I do that 5 times a day, I have 100 ounces. If I do it 4 times a day, I have 80 ounces. If I do it 4 times a day, I just make sure that I start a little bit sooner and drink more frequently earlier the next day. That way I can make sure I'm hitting that 100 ounces of water. But I drink like 2 glasses of coffee every day. Well, 2 metal mugs of coffee every day. But if I'm not getting that water in, I can feel the difference. Like even right now, I just got back from a networking group. I drank when I came in, but I didn't drink for a couple hours before that. And it's like already 90 something degrees here in Texas. So I'm feeling my throat is a little bit dry, but I also do know that I had, I believe, 3 of them today. So I have time to get the other 2 in before I go to bed. So gluttony is one of those things that I often try to relay to my clients and to anybody who talks to me about food, and how that is right up there with drunkenness in the Bible. And I know that is sometimes a little bit harsh to think about, oftentimes, because when you just throw something in people's face like, oh, well, it's in the Bible, you shouldn't be doing it because it's in the Bible, that can be a little intimidating. And depending on how you do it, a little rude. I'm going to try to look this up real quick so we can pull up the actual verse. So when we're analyzing different things that maybe we should be addressing, so we know that, okay, man, I can't spell. So if we're analyzing the things that we're doing currently and we're working on getting towards the next step, but we're not necessarily sure what we are supposed to be working on, oftentimes, and this is something my grandma has been saying since I was a little kid, and she still tells me too, and I'm glad that I have that reminder frequently. But one thing that we can be doing is going into the back of the Bible. Oftentimes there will be a glossary in there, and you'll be able to look up just a few words that might be pertaining to what you're working on. So back in the day when I was younger, I always looked up the word anger or temper or mad, things like that. I think anger is the one that's really in there more frequently. But it takes you to scripture that is going to revolve around that. Now, it's not always going to be directly related to what you're working on currently. So one thing that you want to be aware of, or one thing you want to do, is peruse through as many of those scriptures or passages, verses that you can, because the more that you're able to see what the Bible is talking about in relation to whatever, I don't want to say problem, but whatever thing you're working on, whatever habit you're trying to work on, the more you can look into that, the more you can see, the more you'll be able to pick out those verses that are going to actually apply to you. And what I mean is, like, you can look up the word, what's a good one? You can look up the word bread, and there's going to be a verse where it talks about Jesus being the bread of life. And then there's also going to be the passages where it's talking about the breaking of bread, or the loaves and fishes, depending on the loaves and fish. Sorry, there's a nonprofit here in Austin called Loaves and Fishes, so I always say fishes in that sense. But there would be the bread of the feeding of like the 3,000 and the 5,000. So it's going to sometimes vary depending on what exactly your passage you're reading. So it's good to be able to show, or to continue to read a few more passages until you find what's going to be directly related. Now, there is a verse in here that talks about, or that is from, I believe, Galatians, where Paul is writing the epistle to Galatia. I think it's Galatians. But right here, Proverbs 23:2, and I like Proverbs because it's the book of wisdom. Proverbs 23:2 says, "And put it to your throat if you're a man of great appetite." Now, there is going to be a lot in the Bible that's going to be very extreme. I hear this a lot where people are like, "Oh, well, that's so negative." It's like, okay, or is it a warning? So the way I take this one right here is basically, if you're a man of great appetite, if you're gluttonous, it's going to lead to death. So you might as well, let me not say that. I'm not condoning anything that is going to be harmful to you whatsoever. I'm just reading a Bible verse here. If you're a man of great appetite, this is just saying, that it's going to lead you down a not so great road. So you want to be scanning through the different passages that you may see, so that way you can differentiate or use your discernment to be able to show which one is going to be more applicable to you. So this one is the one that I was alluding, or well, one of them that I was alluding to earlier. So this is Luke, which is a historical book, still full of the Gospels information, just not from someone who was there with Jesus. So Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and John were all there with Jesus. They're relaying the Gospels as told, from different perspectives, inspired by the Holy Spirit. Luke 7:34, it says, "The Son of Man has come eating and drinking, and you say, 'Behold, a gluttonous man and a drunkard, a friend of tax collectors and sinners.'" So tax collectors, being called a tax collector back in the day was not a good thing. It was an insult, to say the least. So what I often tell people, and this isn't something I say to all of my clients, because obviously I have to take people's emotions into consideration as I'm helping them, or as I'm trying to guide them through the process and everything. Whoa, that's not what I want to do. But when someone is, especially I know they're Christian, and when someone is making jokes about how they like to eat a lot and they just can't stop and all this other stuff, I'm like, it does say that gluttony is right up there with being a drunkard. Being a drunkard is not good either. Drinking, not necessarily a sin, as long as you're not getting drunk. You want to stay sober-minded, so a drink here and there, as far as I know, is not a sin, but it can be easy to go over that limit when it comes to that, especially if you're a lightweight. So, but drunkenness and gluttony are put there in the same category. And they're saying that tax collectors and sinners is who they're friends of. So it's basically like saying, okay, so these two things over here, gluttonous and drunkenness, are right up there with being a tax collector and a sinner. And it's like saying, this is bad. It's along there with the worst of the worst. And not saying that I'm sin-free. We're all sinners. I'm definitely a sinner. Do my best to turn to God in the times where I'm about to make a wrong decision. I don't catch myself every time, but it's definitely one of those things that I don't want to be continuing in any sin that I have, as best as I can, as much as I'm aware that it's even happening. And another reason why I like my immovable goal to be getting closer to God more every day is because the Holy Spirit working in you is going to continually make you aware of things that are needing to be addressed in order to move you forward to that goal. And now, if you're a Christian, I mean, that should be everybody's goal. But if you're a Christian, that is the ultimate goal. Pretty much no matter what goal you put in place, the ultimate goal for a Christian is to continue to get closer to God every single day. I'll just leave it at that. So the Holy Spirit moving in you is going to be getting you closer to that every single day. Now, I know some people will word it that the goal is to continue to do the will of God, or the goal is to live your purpose on as God lays it out for you. I don't want to get into semantics here. To me, that more or less means the same thing as the other thing. So you doing the will of God is getting you closer to God. You trying to get closer to God is going to get you closer to God. Either way, the Holy Spirit is going to continue to compound those skills that you're getting, those revelations that you're getting, increase your discernment in order to get you to move closer towards that relationship, so that you're able to do your purpose here for God's children and to bring more people into salvation for those purposes. So when it comes to the gluttony, it's right up there with drunkenness, as I was saying before. And this is one of those things that, as you're evaluating, as you're taking inventory on the different things that you're working on, or the different smaller skills that you see that you need to work on in order to move closer to your goals, it's good to make sure listening, I want to say this carefully, but you're listening to that inner voice that we often ignore. A lot of people will tell me sometimes, well, I don't know how to fix this relationship. I don't know how to fix my eating habits. I don't know how to not sit in front of TV and watch it all the time. And oftentimes I'll tell them, the answer to that is, as soon as you think I should be doing this, go do that. Like, don't just sit there in your shoulds all the time. If you do that, you're going to end up staying where you are, or in fact, usually end up going backwards. So one of the things after you take inventory is, whenever you are repeating a habit that you want to change, you hear that voice in your head that says, let's just say, for, sitting on the couch watching TV, when you don't really need to be doing that. When you have that voice in your head that says, I should go and take my dog out for a walk, go take your dog out for a walk. Like, it's going to not only be conducive for you on your journey, but it's going to build that relationship with your puppy too. If it's something that it's like, let's say you're about to make a decision on where you're going to go eat, and you're about to drive to McDonald's, but you want to go to, oh man, it's so hard to think of healthy options nowadays. That's sad. You want to go to HEB or Acme or ShopRite or Kroger's and get some food to cook yourself. And you're like, oh, I should just go get some food to cook for myself. Go with that should. You can find less processed or unprocessed foods there and make something that you can very well taste better than the McDonald's or the Taco Bell. That's used to be my weakness. I've gotten better than that you would probably be getting if you were to just be like, oh, I'm tired, I just want to get some food. It's easy to not push through that being tired stage. It can be very difficult to take that step to build on those actionables, to be able to do the decision that you're working on, but you just don't want to. So after taking inventory, after making your movable goal, after breaking it down into bite-sized pieces, after working on those goals and evaluating, why does this feel weird? Why does it feel like I'm constantly battling myself? I want to do the bad thing. And going into scripture, going into the truths that are going to make it very real on where your habits actually lie, where your wants actually lie, as far as, are they something that is going to lead you towards darkness? Or are they something that's going to lead you towards the light? To put it in very black and white wording, we choose the one that's going to take us in towards light. And then instilling those habits is the next step. So it starts with, and I forget what people call this, but pretty much awareness is the first thing that's going to happen. So before you, or as you're doing something that you're not supposed to be doing, or even after you've done something that you're not supposed to be doing, you are aware that is something you weren't supposed to be doing. So you want to take inventory of that. You want to check in with that. You want to make that a little bit of a note in your mind, being like, I shouldn't have done that. I'm going to be better next time. If it is something that's sinful, of course, we want to make sure we're praying about it, repenting about it, and not doing it again. We are human, so that may happen. But what happens is, initially, you recognize when you did do it. Then you recognize while you're doing it. Then you recognize while you're doing it and you stop it. Then you recognize before you do it and hopefully don't do it. And then from there, you realize you don't have that temptation to either even take in whatever practice the habit or the sin has been. So those are the different steps that usually we end up going through in order to break the habits that we're working on and instill the new ones. So notice I didn't say that we're replacing those habits. It's just recognizing them and getting away from the habit that we're trying to work through. Now, that can and usually does come with replacing them, but we do want to make sure that it's going to be replacing them with something that will lead us to sustainable success or sustainable and maintainable success and scalability, for the example of me building this business, as I was talking about in the beginning of the video. And a very simple example of that was, I was just at a network event. I almost sat down with a few people to hang out and eat with them. But then I realized, if I don't leave now, I'm not going to be able to make it in time for the video. when I wasn't able to figure out how to get my OBS working, at first it was I couldn't figure out how to go live on LinkedIn. My account is not able to go live yet because it hasn't been there long enough. I don't have enough people following me. I was like, oh, I'm just not going to go live. That's what I would have said. But my mind went to, well, let me go live on Facebook. Went on Facebook, realized same thing. Can't go live on my account over there yet. I don't have enough people following that page, and it hasn't been up long enough in order for me to be eligible. I've been live on this channel before. I know how it works. So I was like, okay, let me just open up the OBS. Let me get the YouTube live going. I'm going to get started. I'm even getting chills thinking about this, because to me, it's just how far I've come from making those lazy choices to making the choices that are going to get me further into my goal. And it should be the same for you. It will be the same for you. So once I realized that, I was like, okay, let me open up this stuff, get everything connected. My OBS wasn't connecting for my YouTube for some reason. Figure that out later. But I told myself I'm not going to not go live again. I won't say I've been pushing this off for a week. There were some technical difficulties that I had to figure out in order to get to this point. But I wanted to make sure that I was taking that habit of me just going to watch YouTube myself or build the business, and because I need to build the business and it's something I need to do anyway. But at the same time, the business is built. Now it's going to be continuing to build on top of things and do these things right here. So I'm able to grow it and get more clients and be able to help more people. And not only that, but to be able to share the things that I do know and the things that I'm learning with you so that you can see, again, behind the scenes. So first thing that we do is we notice that we did something wrong. We notice while we're doing something wrong. We notice when we're about to do something wrong. And then because of the habits of replacing it or doing something different in the meantime, we start doing what's going to get us towards our goals. So after all of that, it becomes, how do we figure out how to sustain this? And this is will be the last thing. I don't know. We'll see. We'll figure out how do we sustain this. And what I mean by that is my example is going to be walking with proper posture. So, or sitting with proper posture. So a lot of times as we're walking around, we usually just go with whatever our body naturally wants to do. So if you're any age above 10 at this point, your posture, it's been pretty consistent for at least a few years to where you're starting to either walk with rolled shoulders, walk with anterior pelvic tilt, pigeon-toed, duck feet, whatever the terms that are politically correct now that we're supposed to be using. You probably have a set position that you end up walking, standing, sitting in. So it's important to think, okay, if I'm working towards something I want to be sustainable at, and I'm usually going to take this back to gym relation or at least health related stuff because that's what I know best. How am I going to be able to sustain this going forward into the future? So for me, I haven't been standing on my feet a lot lately because I've been behind the desk. But when it comes to my in-person clients, I'm usually on my feet for about 8 hours a day when I have the full schedule that I'm looking to build again. So for me to not be thinking about my posture on a consistent basis, especially when it comes to standing in one position, it's going to end up building up and giving me pains that are going to just be detrimental to my body. So you want to be thinking about the different things that you could do in order to keep yourself in a healthy position, in a healthy attitude, no matter what situation you're in. So to keep with the posture setting, as you're sitting down at the desk, you want to constantly be sure that your chest is open, you have your core engaged, all that fun stuff. This goes into even when you're doing your dishes, when you're brushing your teeth, when you're picking up your kids, when you're petting your dog, when you're picking up groceries, when you're, I know everyone wants to one trip the groceries. Carry as many as you can for all I care. But bend from your knees, don't lift with your back, keep the core tight. Make sure you're thinking about your posture as you're standing up and holding the bags. It's more important than you would believe. So those are the different things that you want to be keeping in mind. If you're a reader, make sure that you're reading with the book more upright so you can have your neck in a more neutral position. Our position oftentimes is like this, especially if you're reading on your phone and all that fun stuff. I don't have it right now, but I have this wooden prop for books and for my iPad. So when I'm reading, what I do is I just drop my chair like this. So that way I'm eye level with my book and I'm able to just look straight forward. Now, again, I'm not perfect, so it's not how it works out every time. But when I recognize it, I change it as soon as I possibly can. And since I don't have that thing right here, right now, I'd lower my chair and make sure I have my head up, or I bring everything up to me so I can read it at face level. So make it a movable goal, break down the goal into bite-sized pieces. Even though it may feel wrong, recognize the things that you're doing and try to make the better choices. Recognize how bad some of those things can be and replace them with something that is going to be more good, leading you to your goal, and then instilling it as permanently as you possibly can by making those choices repeatedly. And sometimes what I used to do, and I know this is a funny one that a lot of people get a kick out of, but I used to do HVAC work. So as I was driving, I actually had a sticky note that said, "Don't forget to smile." And it was up on, and I drew a smiley face, and I paper clipped it to my visor. So as I was driving, I actually, when I looked up at it, I would make sure that I was smiling. It's not the healthiest way to go about things per se, because a lot of people will say, well, you're allowed to be sad every now and again or upset or whatever it was. But when you do HVAC work, if you've ever done any blue collar work, you'll understand that sometimes those days, the clients that you work with, the people you work with can be so disheartening to be around, and even sometimes completely contradictory to what you're even trying to do, that it's hard to get in the right mindset to be able to move forward in more positive direction. So sometimes I'd be in the car for 3 hours, and I'll be completely honest with you. There were times where I was crying, and I looked up at that and I made myself smile. I know it sounds really weird, but it's to the point now where my cheeks, like, I naturally will go more into a smile shape with my face than I will a frown, because those muscles are just stronger at this point. And don't give me that, well, it takes more muscles to frown, so you're doing a workout. No. Smiles actually do something to the chemistry in your brain, so we'll go with that. And then we want to make sure that we're translating all of these different micro skills that we're doing into the real or daily life. And the next thing, and this will be the thing that I'll end on, is understanding your goal. Maybe I'll end on it. I don't know. Understanding your goal, or your reason why. So this is a little bit different. And now I know I'm using the same word twice. I'm honestly still working on my verbiage for this, because I want to make sure that that immovable goal never changes. So in between, what I've started saying is working on your targets, because the targets, they can move around. You can make different targets. You can rebuild those and all that other fun stuff. But the goal, the immovable goal, should always be the same. And I say should for a reason, because sometimes we don't set something that is permanent enough, and we need to make sure that we're evaluating that and willing to make something that is going to be a higher goal, if that's the case. I don't think there's anything higher than living your will out for God, but not everybody who I work with is a Christian, and I don't expect you to be if you're watching this right now. But I will do my best to give you all the encouragement to go in that direction as I'm able to. So understanding your end goal, I'm going to say understanding your end target, or understanding your reason. Now, understanding your target. So like I said, some people will come into the gym, and even with me, one of my targets was to be healthier and, to make 3 generations of wealth, because I don't have kids myself, but I have 2 nieces. I love them to death. And my brother-in-law and my sister work their butts off, and they do a great job. I have no doubt that those kids are going to have everything that they want and need. Well, I won't say want. My sister's good at disciplining her kids in a very right way. Not saying beating, that is not what happens, but there are boundaries set, which is great. I'm so encouraged to see that, because I know there are some situations where there aren't any boundaries, there isn't any discipline, and the kids end up ruling their parents, and then that can be something that in the long run doesn't end up being good. So I want to be clear that my nieces, they're not going to need anything. But as I'm thinking about making this goal for 3 generations of wealth, I used to say, well, I want to do it for my nieces. And I understood the reasoning. I understood the end goal. But for me, I didn't have the immovable goal in place yet. So immovable goal in place first. Now I still am doing this for my nieces as one of my intermediate steps, whatever. Because once I hit that, once I get to the point where my nieces are like, if there's ever a point where, let's just say they want to go to college and I'm allowed to pay for their college and I'm in a position to be able to do so, I want to be able to do so. So once I'm in the position to be able to do so, I can change that target or change the meaning behind that target. Let's say for you, it's going to be, let's say you just got out of college and your goal is to do a similar thing to this, to start a business. You want to instill why you're starting that business. I'll give another example. So your reasoning might be that you want to have kids one day, just like myself, and you want to make sure that as you're searching for the person who is going to be the mother or father of your kids, that the kids and the wife are going to be taken care of if anything is to happen. So my goal is to be a stay-at-home dad at some point, but all of this has to be to a point where if my wife didn't want to work, she has the choice to not work. I'm not going to be a stay-at-home dad with my wife needing to work because we need the income. If that's the case, then I work as well. So that may be your goal also, as far as you want to build a business so that you can have kids in the future. So understanding that end goal, you want kids in the future, at least that target, you want to have kids in the future. The reasoning behind it, for me, I know that I don't want to live, I'm not going to say alone per se, because I know I'm not alone. I have plenty of people around me to support me, and the Holy Spirit always with me. But I want a family one day. So the reasoning behind why I want it, or why I want a family, is because number one, I just think it's right. It's the right thing to do. And number two, with what is going on nowadays, I want to be able to bring kids into this world and raise them the right way, as opposed to how a lot of kids are being raised nowadays and strictly going off of doing whatever they feel they want to do or whatever they feel is right. So being able to teach the positives and the negatives of my experience, and be able to teach the biblical principles to the next generation, so that there's more of a turning towards God instead of a turning towards sin. So that's the reasoning for me. So it's very important to analyze your reasoning for whatever your target is, in that sense. Now, we could come back further, and this is just like making your goal into bite-sized pieces. We could come back further and say that your goal is to, or your target is to buy a house. So then you start breaking that down also. Why do you want to buy a house? You start breaking that down also. And then you just start breaking it down into smaller steps until you have it in bite-sized pieces. But if you want to learn more with me, continue to watch these lives as I go forward. And hit the link in the description below if you want to come train with me, whether online or if it's in the future and you're here in Central Texas, in person also. But for today, that's all I got for you. I appreciate you joining. I appreciate you watching if this is in the future. Hello from the past. And stay tuned for more from me and ARC Training Gym.